Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the Zack Scriven podcast, and in today's episode, we're talking with Eric Compton. He's the owner of Arrington Automation in Houston, Texas, and it's really good to have him on the show. We talked about running a system integration business as well as a host of other automation-related topics. And I wanted to first take a shout out to take a moment to say, thank you 4.0 Solutions, but really more importantly, thank you Tatsoft, best-in-class SCADA automation or MES and a rapid application development platform. Tatsoft is not only the only product in that best-in-class category. The other best-in-class product for that SCADA, MES, and rapid application development platform would also go to Ignition. The main difference between FactoryStudio from Tatsoft and Ignition by Inductive Automation is that Ignition is built in Java. Tatsoft and FactoryStudio is built in .NET, so you kind of get to really choose your flavor there. But definitely you should be taking a look at Tatsoft and their product FactoryStudio, because it is a best-in-class platform, and it is a essential tool for the system integrators tool belt. So anyways, thank you guys. Thank you 4.0 Solutions. Thank you Tatsoft, and thank you listeners. Enjoy the show.
How you been?
I've been good, man. How have you been?
Busy, but good.
That is good. Not busy and good. I'd be a little curious.
Yes, absolutely. No, we sorry I had to reschedule earlier in the week. Had a wastewater treatment plant startup this week, and Wednesday was the first day on site, and I already knew it was going to be crazy because it went from nothing to, hey, we're ready, and where are you?
That's always how it goes, man. That's always how it goes. It'll be like years sometimes. Like construction project will go out, and you'll have pretty much forgotten about it by the time they're like, hey, it's pretty much ready, and then you get the project ready and install it. But I know how it goes. So thank you anyways for being here, taking the time. It worked out because we just talked to Dustin and Justin, and so now I just kind of batched them all together. Now it's more efficient for me. So thank you.
No worries. No worries. So, I know you got do a bunch of editing and all that kind of stuff afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And then these are going to go out in May?
Yep. All the podcasts are, being pre-recorded, and for Automation Month is due to release in May with some promotional clips maybe posted before then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the biggest thing is just learning the story of the individual, and also, learning some insights. I've talked to a wide range of people, from like people like us that do the actual system integration to like people that work at Rockwell, people that are, product managers, marketers, but generally in the industrial automation theme. So pretty interesting to see how it'll come out. And the response has been very welcome so far, so I'm excited about it.
Very cool. No, I think it's neat. You see all kinds of people doing social media stuff and all other facets of life. So it's really neat to see a group of people come together, and just in general with kind of like that circle of LinkedIn folks that, are always commenting. You, me, Dustin, Justin, Mr. Cycle, although I worry he's going to run himself into the ground one of these days, it's cool. Like it's neat to see a bunch of, what I would call really good professionals, discussing stuff and cutting up a little bit and getting to know each other as much as you can through social media. But it's something that's real and that is unique, and it matters to us, as geeky as we are sometimes. But to have something that is important and meaningful to our career and stuff, it's neat.
Yeah, let's circle back to that Derek Stickle for a second, because for those of you guys that don't know, Derek is a pretty big automation influencer on LinkedIn. He's a huge Rockwell guy. I mean, he's been posting content long before I started posting videos and really becoming active on LinkedIn. I think he has like 14,000 followers now. I mean, he had over 10,000 when I first started, and he kind of has he does a really great job at building his brand. It kind of is like that workaholic, like mean, he has like 3 different jobs, and he'll be working like 20 hours a day. So he kind of has his brand built around that, which is, it's what people know him for, for being passionate about this industry, which
Right.
is really cool. But that also kind of comes with some downside, like that is kind of the dark side of this industry where, we're traveling so much, we're, maybe away from our families, and, maybe not having that balance. Or, I don't know. What's your take on that?
No, I agree completely. And I think, he had this big startup here this past weekend or weekend before. And I've been in his shoes so many times. It's the 11th hour on Sunday before you're getting ready to start up on Monday, and it's not going just perfect quite yet. And sometimes you just need to vent. And he put that one post up just saying, this stinks, but here we are. And people did not take it well. There were a few people that were very supportive, and that was really cool to see how supportive they were. But then a few people really hated on him, and how did you let yourself get in this position? And it's not okay, and how dare you risk a customer's project and all that kind of stuff. But unless you do this work day in, day out, it's really hard to understand, because a lot of times we'll do so much work up front with design and testing, and then you try to simulate every weird thing that you can possibly think of that would happen physically and from an operator doing something crazy out in the field. But inevitably, you run into stuff that doesn't work how you thought it was going to, and you have to adjust for that. And sometimes on really big systems, those things add up.
Right.
And you can only put one fire out at a time. So I completely get it. Have been there many times before. But I think it was kind of neat to see how everyone rallied around him after that. It was like, man, it'll be okay. You'll get through it. Stick with it. And I think in the end, it worked out okay, and they had a good startup. I think he even said they started up a day early. But it's a rough life. And he
Yeah.
put it best when he was talking about his wife being like his support structure, and how she enables him to have this career and to do all the neat stuff that he does, because she's at home, all the time with the kids, taking care of stuff. And my wife's the same way. You get the text on the weekends or after a long start. It's like, so when are you coming home? It's like, well, I think I'm leaving soon, but we'll see. And then 4 hours later, you get the other text. It's like, so about you coming home. um, yeah, it's just, I think it's one of those evils of this industry. But at the same time, that feeling that you get at the end of a startup when you finally solve all those problems and you get to look at that system running, and it's like, I did that. Like, that's mine. That's my baby. That was work culminating in this one big success. It makes it all worth it.
Yeah. So, why don't maybe, like, for someone who's kind of newer to the industry, doesn't really know what it is that we do as a system integrator, why don't you kind of talk through what a typical project looks like, and some of the challenges that we're faced with?
Sure. So what is systems integration? So the first thing I usually start with when someone asks me what I do, I usually apply with it's factory automation, and ask if they've ever seen how it's made, right? Because I do all the programming that makes machines and things like that work to make things, right? And a lot of people leave it there, and that's okay. And then some people get really interested. It's like, oh, well, that's cool. Um, but so systems integration is kind of taking all the parts and pieces of an industrial automation system and making those work. So it's a really awesome mix of engineering, both electrical and mechanical, and oftentimes chemical for those of us that play in the process field. Um, and combining all those together to get something done or to make things. So for a standard project, typically you'll meet with the customer, have a kickoff meeting, and those next few weeks are often the hardest time in the project, because you're trying to figure out exactly what the customer wants, exactly what the requirements are, and how they want this system to operate, and if they have anything similar, how does it work, or are you replacing an older system with a new one? and they have zero documentation on how that old system works. So you have to spend weeks, going through old, horribly maintained panels, tracing wires and making documentation and, trying to figure out exactly what you've got to replace. Because at the end of the day, the success of the project it depends on you having a very good handle on what's there and what's required and what's needed to make the system work right. So I know for most of us, after that, we get into a lot of panel design and even panel construction. And that's one of the things with Walker, with one of his videos, Integrator 3.0 is like, how do you know a 3.0 integrator? They've got a panel shop. And that made me laugh out loud, because it's really true, especially here in Houston. There's a lot of water and wastewater, and it seems like there are a million panel builders. So that always factors into it. But then after that comes the cool part, right? Where you get to do all the programming and the HMI work to actually make all this stuff function. And that's hand in hand with long documents of functional descriptions and basically writing down on paper how things need to work. So as you develop kind of this functional description, oftentimes you're coding kind of in parallel, because on most projects in integration nowadays, there's not nearly enough time to do serial development. It's almost always in parallel. And you have to be very agile to get it done to meet some of these schedule requirements. So from there, on all of our projects, we insist, even though a lot of our customers still fight it sometimes, to do full simulation. They would rather not pay for the man hours up front and risk it in the field at startup. But then I think with most customers, if you can talk them into it, and you show them that simulation at FAT, which is a factory acceptance test, of how their system's going to operate. And their operators can sit down at your laptop or another PC and click through the HMI screens, look at trends, with simulated values on them, and actually interact with the system virtually before it's even installed in their plant. The first time they do that, then it's never an argument again. They usually see the value in that, and that's really cool. And then from there, you go into the actual application and install the code, install the hardware, and check it all out and start it up.
Yeah, it's a very interesting field, because we're always like the last person in the door. The mechanical contractors, long gone, and the electrician has already been in there and done their work, and so we're like the glue that ties all these systems together: electrical, mechanical, chemical, sometimes even business and IT systems, which we're starting to now connect the IT side of things to the OT side, operational technology, informational technology. We're now starting to glue those systems together into like business logic. So now we're kind of tying all these systems together to make it actually function in a way that it was designed to or imagined to. And sometimes the design doesn't always make it to what they thought it was. So then we kind of redesign it sometimes. But yeah, that's it's interesting, because then, you're the last one in the door, but like you said, they're like, oh, you should have already had this done. Like, so it's a tough industry. It's kind of I don't know. Sometimes I call it like a thankless job. It's very, you got to be internally motivated. You got to be internally gratified by the work that you do. Like you said, oh, that feeling you get when you start up the system, you're like, wow, I did that. Like I made that logic come to life. That's the type of rewards that you get. But oftentimes I found like, the customer, they had already expected it to work. So like there's, they're only mad when it's not working. And then when it is, it's like, well, it should have been anyway. So in that regard, it's kind of thankless sometimes, but yeah, it's definitely a tough industry and unique. So I find it interesting, the people that are able to rise against the challenges and start their own firms like you've done. So what was that like, being able to start your own firm?
It's been an interesting ride. So I worked with a really, well, I'll say a larger system integrator in Nashville for almost 9 years. Um, it was a really great place to work. They were an awesome company to work for, awesome people, and I learned a ton, not only about integration, but about business as well, being there. Um, but like with a lot of larger integrators, especially once you get in with a customer, especially if you perform well for that customer wants you to keep coming back and keep doing their projects, which is great. But if you're really learning driven and interested in new technology, different platforms, different HMI packages, uh, back then industrial Internet of Things wasn't more than a catchphrase, so it didn't really matter back then. But you get in with one customer and it's very much a set of tools that you get to use, right? So I'd kind of gotten into one of those situations, and was ready to expand and try new things. So I started out, my whole business started out with me just wanting to be a contractor. So that way I could, pick projects, pick partners, and everything to go work for. But at the same time, I could pick projects that interested me, that I knew would be a push, to teach me something about tie-ins with SAP on one, or uh, a different type of batching software, or a new PLC platform. And it was really cool. But as luck would have it, as we went into some of those customers, they keep asking you to come back, which is great until you've got 3, 4, 5 of those and you're only one person. So over time, I've really had to leverage my network from the past, 15, 16 years of doing this, to pull in contractors as needed or other resources for startups. And then I guess probably 7, 8 months ago, I actually hired my first employee, which was insanely scary. But he was a super sharp dude that I'd worked at a startup that I do some work with here in Houston. And things were kind of slowing down there a little bit. And I did not want to let him get away, because he was one of those guys, you only meet a few of them in your lifetime. And when you work with them and talk with them, they're just insanely brilliant. So he was one of those. So I pulled him in with me as well and haven't looked back since. So it was a bit of a reach initially because it was a shift in mindset, right?
Yeah.
I was looking for contracting gigs. Hey, integrator XYZ, I want to work with you on a project, or work with an EPC on a really big greenfield or brownfield project. And switching from that to actually having to go out and do the sales and find the projects and working that way, it's been interesting. It's been tough. It's not always the greatest, but again, if you're interested in learning and continuing to challenge yourself, it's a side of the business that I had never really had to push for before. Working with a large integrator, especially with the same customers, you just have that continued flow of projects. As soon as 1, 2, or 3 of these get done, you'll have another 2 or 3 that come in to keep your team busy as long as times are good. And we're just now finally getting into that stride in my business now, where things are really starting to snowball and getting some repeat customers and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a challenge, but it's been great.
So what are some of the things that have worked for you on the sales and marketing side of your business?
So here in Houston, it's it's very interesting to me. We came from Nashville about 3 years ago. The majority of my background is in food and beverage, traditional manufacturing, but all of that in process controls, right? And then moving to Houston, obviously with oil and gas, we have a really large process presence here, but it's a completely different industry than I've worked in before. It's the same pumps and valves and motors and all that kind of stuff. But everyone here in Houston focuses on that oil and gas market. And you may not know it, but there's actually a really decent manufacturing presence here in Houston. I mean, there's some big manufacturers. Coke's building one of the newest, most state-of-the-art bottling plants here in North Houston. That's supposed to start up this fall. We've got 3 or 4 bigger microbreweries. We've got Carbach, St. Arnold's, Shiners, just a couple of hours away. So I've recently found out, probably here in the past 6 to 8 months, that this whole group of manufacturing clients was severely underserved because everyone was concentrating on black gold. So it's been really neat to kind of spread out into that network and get to know different customers and be able to supply some expertise that was very lacking in the area.
Do you also work with any of the refineries in the oil and gas market, or are you diversifying?
Not typically. So the majority of my background is more PLC controlled process. To kind of date myself, the only real DCS systems I worked on are the older Westinghouse Tusk DCSs from the very beginning of my career, which nobody has anymore. So most of my experience is all process or PLC-based process control, and most of the refineries are either Honeywell or Foxborough or Delta V. They're usually one of the big DCS manufacturers. Now, with that said, there's a lot of cool niche applications for PLC inside those refineries. A lot of them will have, small skidded systems that are all PLC based that then kind of feed up into the DCS for overall system control. So we've got, had a few projects doing systems like that. I've even talked to a lot of refinery and chemical processors here lately about smaller SIS and shutdown systems and using, like a GuardLogix PLC or like a SIL2 system from Rockwell, because when they talk to their DCS distributor about expanding out their current Triconics or, whatever their safety solution is, the cost is just astronomical for some of these smaller systems. So there's a market there. It's just you have to find the right spot.
Okay. So put us on game about a DCS. What is a DCS and compared to a PLC-based control system?
Well, so it's interesting you ask that question, because nowadays, to me, there's not a whole lot of difference, especially if you look at some of the new architectures that Rockwell is really pushing and Siemens as well. But traditionally, DCS was a distributed control system, right? So it consisted of multiple sets of redundant CPUs and associated field I/O. But the intent of the design is that the system never goes down. It's designed to operate 24/7, 365. Everything is configurable and editable online. You can add I/O online. And typically, you only have to bring the system down for really major upgrades in CPUs or major installations of additional processing units and stuff like that. Whereas PLCs traditionally have been, marketed at discrete manufacturing and much smaller systems. But I think if you look at, kind of the PLC market now, with redundant processors and all that kind of stuff, you can architect pretty much the same system nowadays with PLCs that you could with a DCS. It's just a little bit of a different look and feel and a little bit different hardware.
Awesome. So, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to this year in the industry, like whether it be events or technologies or releases?
Tech Ed's always fun. It's been probably 2 or 3 years since I've been to Tech Ed. And for those of you who don't know, Tech Ed is a learning event that Rockwell does once a year in June. I can't remember if it's in Orlando or San Diego this year, but it's a week-long conference basically about everything that is Rockwell. You can take classes on Logic CPUs. You can take classes on View, SE, ME, just about every software package and every hardware platform they have. There are classes on it to learn about it. So if you do Rockwell integration, it's an awesome opportunity to go and really find out what their latest and greatest is, best practices for everything. And the best part is you get to meet all of the product managers for all of those platforms. So when you run into something really weird, you have the name of that guy at Rockwell rather than calling level 1 support, hey, I need this guy for this problem, because you've met him before. And it's just a really neat networking opportunity to get to know all those people, within Rockwell, and see all the new cool toys that are out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we met, or we ran into each other at Automation Fair last year.
Yep.
And I'm sure Walker would love to go to Tech Ed and all the Rockwell events, being that he's such a huge fan of Rockwell Automation.
Absolutely.
I say that slightly tongue in cheek.
Oh, I know.
Okay. So tell me about how you're starting to become more active on LinkedIn and what you're seeing on LinkedIn unfold.
So it's really neat, I guess, kind of like we talked about before, just to see so many people interested and kind of active in talking about automation topics, whether it's, panels they're getting ready to ship out. It's always cool seeing someone's handiwork, and real hardware getting ready to go out into the field, or, screenshots of HMI screens, things that they're tinkering with, trying to come up with a better layout or something for high performance HMIs. It's just really cool seeing what everyone else has out there and what everyone's doing. And I think that's really starting to snowball kind of, in the general circle of automation that all of us talk in. And the one place that I keep meaning to try and put more content out is like in video. So where you can, kind of talk through topics and posts. So one of the ones I've been meaning to put a video out forever on, back at Automation Fair, there was a really good class on ISA 101 and high performance HMI design, right? Well, when you say high performance HMI design nowadays, or ISA 101, the first thing that everyone immediately thinks about is grayscale screens, right? And that's about where it stops to most people. It's like, oh, get rid of the pipe animation, the screens look really boring, and maybe there's some added trends, but that's about it. But the biggest selling point to me about ISA 101 is the division of kind of levels of screens. They call it level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And level 1 is basically, designed to be an overall plant view, right? Something you would imagine seeing in a control room up on the huge monitors in the front. And then you have level 2 screens, which are, designed for operators to kind of look at to get an overall feel for how systems are performing as a whole. And then you get down into level 3, which is like P&ID screens, which is what most people think of as an HMI. Usually as systems integrators, we stop at the, we copy the P&ID into the HMI, and that's their HMI screen, and throw some little boxes on there here and there for automatic control of functions and everything. And that's about it. But everyone glosses over that whole level 1 and level 2 portion of ISA 101 in screen design. And if you're really wanting to design a cool product for your end customer, which is what our goal should be, that's the value we add as integrators, those are the places where we need to concentrate in our design reviews. Because, and what got me thinking about this, I can't remember if it was Dustin or maybe Sean liked a post a few weeks ago, and it was a video that an operator had recorded of himself at a power plant or a refinery somewhere, and he was rearranging all the pop-ups on his HMI to get everything where he liked it.
I remember this video. Yeah, that was really cool.
Right? And it's like, why is he having to do that? He shouldn't have to do that. It should be, the screen should be laid out in a way so that all of the information that he needs as an operator is there together. But I think as integrators, a lot of times we miss out on that. Yeah. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I want to focus on here over the next year is, as I go to customers, that, as you see things like that, as you go to classes, what are those gotchas?
Here's the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 screen hierarchy that you're talking about for those people watching. Level 1 process area overview, level 2 process control unit, level 3 process unit detail, and then level 4 diagnostic, interlocks, first outs, procedures, and documentation. So this is kind of what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. And everyone, more often than not, I think a lot of times we gloss over level 1 and level 2, and a lot of those, we'll do that once we're on site. We'll figure out what the operator wants, and we'll, throw some stuff up on the HMI. But I found that if you really talk to the operators during the design, and especially if it's a system upgrade or a change or something that you're implementing on an existing system, if you just sit down with those operators for a few shifts and see how they run things, you can do a really good job at trying to define what those level 1 and level 2 screens need to look like, and then kind of improving upon that as you go through the design review process, so that at the end of the day, when you get to startup, the operator doesn't have to sit down and open up 2 or 3 pop-ups for PID controllers and this one other pop-up for some furnace that usually goes haywire. You can try and get all of that stuff onto the upper level unit control screens so that they have everything there they need. And at the end of the day, that is the value as integrators we should be providing.
Awesome, man. I think that would be really good. And you're pretty much, you're well on your way, because you just did a great job with, explaining it right now on video. So you're really not that far away from just, either clipping it from this video or doing it yourself, right. Or maybe I'll post it and tag you. Who knows?
It's fine either way. That's what it all comes down to time, man. And that's the thing. It's like, one of these days when I'm traveling and I'm sitting in the hotel bored at night, I'll make that video.
And just do it.
And then you look down and it's 2 months later and you still haven't done it. But you can tell just by talking through it. I've whiteboarded it in my head numerous times thus far. It just hasn't made it to video yet.
Well, someone who's doing a really good job at that is Jim Gaffigan. Have you seen him on LinkedIn?
Is Corsa guy?
No, but he is that's Dave. But
that's Dave.
Jim, he's a time series data storyteller, and he's been doing more and more videos. He has his own SI. I think he's based out of Florida. Big Rockwell guy, like Factory Talk Analytics, and he's been doing more and more videos, and him and I have been talking. We're gonna do a podcast here in a week or so, I think.
Okay.
And but he so as the owner of his own firm, he's been really adopting video pretty strongly. He's been putting out a lot of stories, like how he started his company and doing some education on some of these platforms. I'm actually really impressed with how much content he's been able to put out. He's even talked to me about potentially working with me to help put out even more, which is really cool to see. But just seeing that he's doing it on his own, like not everyone needs me, and nor can I serve everyone that needs to create content in the industrial automation space. If I can just kind of be like that turning point, or like that little nudge that people need to start creating it, then I feel like I've done my job. So, he's like, he'll be in the hotel room and he'll be, putting on his headset and doing a video while he's out on the road. So he'd be another person to follow and look for inspiration. But yeah, man, I want you to tag me when you make that video, because that'll be awesome.
Sure.
And I'm also going to I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm working on a screen right now, and I'm going to try to implement that level hierarchy. So that'll be really cool.
Very cool. So let me ask you a question real quick. So what's the platform you're using for freelancing?
Upwork.
Upwork. So, okay.
There's others like it. There's Fiverr, which is slightly different. I wouldn't recommend necessarily using that for automation. It's really good for like blog posts or video editing or certain things like that. And it's also slightly different in that the freelancer creates a job and the clients purchase it. Whereas on Upwork, it's the other way around. The client creates the job and the freelancers bid on it. Um, but there's one called Automate America, which is like focused on just automation. I just learned about that this week. I've talked to a few people about it. That should be pretty interesting. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see like what's going to end up coming out from it, right? Because it's kind of like the Uber and Lyft, and you have all these different competing platforms. I think the more the better. But it's interesting in that I'd like to see how they actually built their technology stack, because what they really could have done is like use something like Upwork's API to build a marketplace on top of Upwork. So without having to rebuild a whole marketplace, just make a market like on top of that, right? So maybe they didn't know about, maybe they did do that and I just don't know yet. But yeah, I use Upwork and I'm just working with one client right now. There has been other people jumping on the platform, either coincidentally or because, you know, Walker's talked about it in his videos. I've talked about it several times, trying to get more people behind that concept of changing the way we think about the employee and employer relationship in terms of industrial automation. So that's really cool. But yeah, I kind of like keeping it at one client because, you know, I've had other requests come in. I had to deny them because I really want to just focus on one thing at a time. If I take on too many SI projects, then I'm going to really fall short on, you know, showing up on video and doing those things that I'm really passionate about. So it's been a good balance.
Sure. No, I was going to ask if you had heard about Automate America. So when I was doing heavy contracting, you know, like a year and a half ago, I think is about the time they started. And I happened to be doing a really big startup at a personal care plant in South Carolina, and they're based out of Duncanville, which is up in just outside of Greenville. And I think the guys that started it were all, I think they were all like ex BMW guys, like SI guys that had done a lot of BMW work. Because if you look at the majority of the jobs that they have posted, a lot of it is there in Greenville, and most of it is like robots and welding and stuff like that. And then now a lot of the stuff they have is in Detroit with autumn, but it seems like they have really good reach into the automotive space.
Okay.
And then some other interesting stuff. But kind of to what you were saying, you know, I've been talking with a lot of my friends and a lot of contacts in the industry here over the past year. I think, you know, when you talk about industrial automation as a whole, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, the whole SI scene is going to change dramatically because, you know, you've got a lot of people that are going out to be contractors that are really sharp and are really good at what they do. And as soon as they have the tools and the platforms to network so that the customers, you know, can put together that dream team that they always want, then you, other than the project management and the, at the end of the day, kind of the ownership of the project, you lose the reason to have that system integrator overhead. So, you know, kind of what Walker was talking about with Industry 4.0, if you've got a bunch of smaller groups of system integrators that are small and nimble, but they have the network to pull in all of these A-plus contractors, then why would you work, you know, with someone and pay all the overhead for all that labor?
Right.
And know that with those smaller integrators that they can also pay the contractors really, really well and have a really good network of contractors so that no matter what project you hire them on, you get the A players. You're not getting one or two A players that are having to spoon feed, you know, requirements and all this stuff to junior engineers or to overseas contractors or, but no, I think it'll be really cool to see where our industry goes over the next decade. with platforms like this and just social media and the ability to, work virtually from anywhere.
Yeah. I'm pulling up the website of Automate America right now. Um, Easy to use, effective all-in-one platform. Occupations: robot programmer, PLC programmer, controls engineer, electrician, automation engineer, robot technician. Those are some of the different jobs. So it's really, and in fact, they're not sponsoring this podcast, although they probably could be. That would be, maybe I'll reach out to them. But the point is, I'm plugging their platform is because I liked their mission. I kind of had the same vision. I was like, why isn't there this platform that exists where it's getting automation engineers, out in the web, working remotely, getting them on the best project that best suits them, right? Like in today's world, there's someone working on project A and there's someone working on project B, and they would really be better off if they were working on the other projects. But because they're in a company and that company has that job, and that's just the way it works out, and we're inefficient because of it. So platforms like that are only going to change that and make that better so everyone can win.
Well, yeah. And, for those of us that have small systems integration firms, the ability to go out and pull in that genius when it comes to a certain technology. Say you go into a customer and they're wanting you to replace an old PCS 7 system from Siemens. That's not my strong suit. Right. You want to go to ControlLogix? Great. I can hook you up with a Cadillac of ControlLogix systems. But when it comes to looking at that old PCS 7 system and figuring out the programming and the inner workings of all the HMI screens and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be a reach for me to do all of that. So the ability to go out and find that expert, with that platform or with that software package is invaluable. And I think it's only going to get better and better as, things shift to more of a virtual mentality and a remote working mentality. Because I know a lot of people really enjoy working out of home offices and, just being able to pick and choose hours and do as they want rather than trudging into the office every day and doing the 9 to 5.
Yeah, that is really going to change our lives. For me, the commute was one of the worst parts about that life was, I just feel like I'm wasting my time here on Earth just sitting in traffic, which is not fun. By the time you get into work, you feel like you've already lost a lot of your energy for the day, and
and it's traffic horrible. You're ticked off and grumpy and absolutely.
So let me think. So yeah, what are some other, I don't know, some other stuff that we could talk about?
No, I think that for me, no, unless you want to go through like
where'd you get that salt rock?
Oh, that was a Christmas gift from the wife.
Does it change the amount of free ions in the air, or is it just a nice light?
It's just a nice light. Just a nice light. But no, I was going to say, I think it's kind of getting back to integration as a field. I'm almost 40. I think Walker's kind of in that same age group. It's interesting to see, I guess, the difference in the dynamic in the old guys that are getting ready to leave the field versus kind of everybody that's in the middle of the road. And then you've got all these new guys that are coming in that are all about, custom coding, custom scripting, all about ignition and open platforms and everything. I think that's going to be the neat thing over the next decade as well, is just kind of seeing all that stuff. So
how do we safeguard ourselves from not being that, dreaded older generation? Like, or
I
are we
think,
just trapped to that just by nature of the way technology works?
well, and just by nature, I think of being technical people, engineers, that kind of mindset, you get really comfortable with um, knowing what you know. And especially if you are comfortable with the technology and the hardware and uh, all of that, it's unless you're just really of that learning mindset, it's a push to force yourself to go out and be uncomfortable again, right? Because at
Right.
the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to is you have to push yourself to be uncomfortable. But if you're not uncomfortable, you're not going to grow.
Mm.
Um, and that's what, because I'm lazy sometimes. The older I get, the more lazy I am. It's like, well, I could go learn that and be a little uncomfortable for a week or two. I know I'll get it. I know I'll learn it. Or I could just do what I know, right? And it's easy. So I think that's just the challenge is to continue to force yourself to step into the world being uncomfortable and force yourself to learn.
It's a really hard problem to solve and to optimize for, because if you just go completely towards the learning and growth mindset, I mean, you'll never actually get a project done because you'll just be learning new stuff all the time.
Yeah,
You, at some point, you gotta settle and just get something done, right?
absolutely. And I think most engineers are just of that mindset anyway, right? They want it to be perfect. Um, Same reason why I haven't posted that LinkedIn video. Well, I've got to be in the right setting. I've got to have this camera because I know the picture will be better. Oh, I probably need to buy that microphone so the sound is just right. You sit there and overthink it all day, right? Because
Yeah.
you want perfection. No different with the technology. As you learn and especially as you start exploring something new, you want to keep uh, trying to perfect it and try to get it right. Where at the end of the day, eventually, you got to just go with it and get it done.
Yeah. I mean, perfection kind of is a fallacy, because the moment, even if you were to deliver something at 100% perfect, the second after you walk away, now all of a sudden it's obsolete, just based on the way that nature works.
Yep. Yep.
So it doesn't, like to deliver something at 80% is better than to try to strive for 100 and never get it out the door, because it's going to be at 80% in a few months or a year's time anyway, just based on, you know, this, like, I run into this problem all the time, is like, all right, do I write a script to develop this, or do I just go punch out those 30 tags? And
Yep.
oftentimes, even if it'll take I'll try to err on the side of automating things, even if I think it'll take the same amount of time, or even if I think it'll take a little more time. Because then if I ever get into a scenario where it's not 30 but it's 300, then surely there will be a payoff. Or if anything, like, at least I'll be confident that there were no mistakes. But it's also a trap. Sometimes you'll fall into, go down this rabbit hole of automating this beast that, like you could, like, all right, I could do this chiller program 1,000,000 times in 2 seconds, but you've only ever gotten one project that does that, and you'll only ever get one, and then you just wasted all this time trying to make engineered beast. It's
Absolutely. Or you look down and it's like, man, I've been working on this script for 8 hours, and if I would have just sat down and just knocked the task out all manually, I'd have been done in an hour.
yeah, those are the hard things that I find myself coming to. I know, I guess I did say I lean more towards the side of automating things, but as I've gotten older, I've also learned that sometimes you just need to knock something out, and
Mhm.
maybe if it's not fully dynamic, if there's a few statically bound tags, I don't think the SCADA system is any less better than, because maybe that SCADA system won't change. Maybe they're not going to be adding new devices every day if it's like a water production facility.
Yeah.
If it's an oil and gas project, and you're using IIoT and MQTT, and they're bringing new wells online every day, then it might make sense to make that investment into making it fully automated to bring new systems online. But
Yeah,
yeah.
sure. And completely go to object-oriented programming and everything. So that way, oh, we need to add a new well. Well, then copy this program, copy this group of objects, and done. Versus, yeah, the old school method. Absolutely. No, it's funny you say that because the wastewater plant we're in the middle of starting up right now, it's Rockwell and VT SCADA. And have you ever used VT SCADA?
No. Who makes that again?
It's by
Cahedral?
Trihedral out of Canada. Yeah. I would say it's ignition-ish. It was kind of designed as an all-in-one kind of SCADA package. The footprint's very small. I think the full install is like 250 megs, maybe 300 megs, and that's visualization, trending, historian, everything. And it's actually a pretty neat package. We've used it on a couple of projects, both in water, wastewater, and then we did a decent sized facility for a chemical plant here north of Houston. But, went through the whole initial design of creating, a device template library for all the device types and all that kind of stuff. So now the rollouts have been quicker and quicker. But kind of like you said, when you sit down at the beginning, it's like, do we just create all of this old school and make it tag based and kind of hard, or do you invest that time up front and spend 2, 3, 4 days to create that library to enable yourself to be way more efficient in the future?
Yeah, I just on this website there. I think it makes sense to. I mean, we're engineers, of course. We're going to want to do it the fancy way, and I think it will pay off in the long run. This is your first time working with VT SCADA, or have you used that platform often?
No, this is probably the 5th or 6th project we've done with it.
Okay. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say their biggest market is probably water, wastewater, and then I think they're slowly getting into oil and gas. But if you look at, they've got a map on their webpage of all their kind of client installs and everything. They're definitely big in the southeast of the U.S. That's their main market.
Okay. Yeah, I see that heat map. That's pretty cool. So what are some of the SCADA packages that you can kind of ramble off the top of your head?
The ones that we're most familiar with, of course, do a lot of Rockwell, so ViewME and SE. Have done a whole lot for a bunch of customers with Wonderware, both classic InTouch and then now application server. And that was a neat product to see kind of come along in development, because we started out, back in 2008 or 9 when they first started releasing application server, and they had those really cool zoomed vector graphics to that one production line where you could click on the little operator buttons and they'd zoom in. And anyway, so yeah, I've been doing Orchestra kind of since the beginning of it. My push right now is to get comfortable with Ignition. So we became an inductive automation integrator a few months ago. So me and a couple of guys are going through the university right now just to check the box. I've already that same device library that we created for VT SCADA, I ported it over into Ignition. So there's some really cool tools in Ignition. When you look at mapping in, like especially control logic UDTs, and just it has really tight integration with a lot of PLC platforms, and that is really cool. And it's really.
What do you mean? So it's native drivers, or what about Ignition do you like the most?
Just I think, like, if you're trying to set up an object-based library, right? So if I want to build a valve, and that corresponds to an object in the PLC, like for a valve, the ability to go grab that UDT and grab that whole data structure and then port that into your structure in Ignition, and automatically pull all of those tags in, so that as you update and kind of build the library, it all builds together and links. It's really cool. They did a really neat job of making. It's not very often I can say that like HMI software is intuitive, like to use if you've never used it before. Having done this years, usually you sit down with a new, especially like HMI products, right? Visualization. It's like, well, I know what I want to draw and I know how I want it to animate. I just need to figure out in this package what those tools look like, or, how to make it do this just like it does in Wonderware or just like it does in Vue. So I think, moving from some of those to Ignition, it was very easy to figure out like how things worked and how things were supposed to be built without having to go through their university. It was really cool just to see how intuitive the software was and how easy it was to, get a project up and running with very little instruction or help.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, they definitely have that ease of use nailed down. And I love also the Python is another thing that I've really come to like about the platform, is the flexibility and what you can do with the Python so easily. It was really kind of one of my first, outside of like basic Excel scripts or basic like Wonderware scripting.
Yep.
Python was kind of one of my first real programming languages that I learned in Ignition. So
very cool. Hey, so off task, the project that Walker talks about in that one of the last videos, the biggest SCADA system in the US or whatever.
Right.
Can you say what that is?
Yeah, it's from my knowledge, it's the Pioneer project, Pioneer Natural Resources. Yeah, I only know because I worked on that project too. It was a Firebrand award-winning project. It was an insane project. You want to talk about? They really were a difficult customer to work for. I'll say it. They had the hardest part for me was like the corporate environment. I had to be in. We were developing on site at their headquarters in Dallas. So like we were there every day. I was constantly I kind of dressed a little more casually. I did dress up. I wore a button shirt and stuff like that. But I would wear jeans with it, or I would wear like a kind of like a plaid, just kind of collared shirt, and it wouldn't really fit in with like their. So I kind of always felt out of place, or if I did feel in place, then I didn't feel comfortable. And just constantly changing. Basically what happened is we tried to do an enterprise project using Integrator 3.0 models and technologies, right? We try to have that waterfall project methodology, and they kept coming at us with all these change requirements, new features, new requests, like new stuff was happening all the time. Like, by the way, that $300 million asset that we were going to work on, well, we just sold that, so now we're not going to do that part. So it's like, oh my gosh, like how do we, those are some of the challenges that we were faced with. Walker did an excellent job kind of being the project lead and kind of mitigating some of that political, like negotiation and stuff. Like he kept the client off of our back, so us as developers could actually get the work done. So that was really useful. I forget who, I think CSE Icon is now supporting that installation. At least from what I've seen, like they've since won another couple Firebrand awards with CSE Icon. I've seen, Charles Lame is the SCADA manager there. He presented, I think they've, added some really cool stuff to the platform, but I look back and I see it's still like, it's the platform that we developed. And it was insane to say the least. That's where I really learned a lot about Ignition, because I had done a few projects before, but it was always like it was just my business, right? So I would do I would get the project, I would do it, and then I would kind of move on and do something else. But this was different in that, like, day in and day out, we were just working on this project, and I had nothing to do all day but work on Ignition, right? I didn't need to go sell more projects, or I just focused on Ignition. And the part that I really worked on the most was the tag structure, trying to figure out how to take 5 or 6 different Wonderware systems, some system platform, some, just basic InTouch applications, how to take those tags and those addresses and those PLCs and normalize them in a way that we can put them into Ignition tags. So the way that I came up with that solution was to load everything from the database dump of our Wonderware applications or whatever system. I wrote scripts to put that into an actual database, SQL Server database, and then wrote my own algorithm my own API to take that information from the database, pump it into Ignition tags using system.tag.create tag. So then basically we modeled the entire, million tag database inside of a database. So then that way we could easily, like if we just deleted the Ignition project, we would just run the script again. And then like in 20 minutes, all the tags would be created again. And that was really crucial because, doing it any other way just wasn't going to work, just doing an import or just doing some massages, like any manual process that needed to be applied. We needed to have some way of documenting that because it was just too much, It was an interesting problem. Yeah.
Well, and especially with a system that big, if it's that fluid as you're trying to develop it, then any manual intervention would cause you to pull your hair out because it's gonna translate into there's always tentacles, right? So as things go away, it's like, oh, well, that used to talk to this and this used to talk to that. So now you got to change all of those. Yeah, that's the only way to make it doable on projects that large.
Right. I know Walker doesn't talk about it specifically because of like NDAs and it used to be at Trimax and such was actually they were the contractor on that project and I was a sub and he was hired on as an engineer and they had kind of since split their ways and Walker has talked about that, like how he started in Telic and how he was kind of forced out, but he doesn't necessarily talk about the specifics of the clients, but I'm free to because I'm I'm just I don't know, I guess I'm willing to put myself out there like that.
No, it was more just curiosity than anything. I need to so we're in Houston, he's in Dallas. I need to schedule some time with him to talk about his thoughts on like big corporate customers, right? So prime example. So one of our customers is Colgate. That was that personal care plant in South Carolina. So we did that whole plant greenfield. I was brought in as a contractor. Do you know Advancion out of Pennsylvania?
No, I've never heard of them.
So they're an integrator out of Pennsylvania. They were brought in to do the project. And I think they originally allocated like 3 guys to it, which was nowhere near enough to get the project done. And when it got time, they shopped out most of the actual programming overseas based on example code and a few design documents. So anyway, by the time it got to the plant, it was like a train wreck. So I got pulled in to kind of clean up the code, redo their device standard routines, the HMI objects, and then kind of start the plant up, right? Everything. So this plant made like liquid soap and deodorant. So everything on liquid soap side was mine processing wise, and like tons of pumps, tons of flow meters, all continuous batching, inline mixing, like some crazy systems, really cool systems to start up. But either way, Colgate standard is Rockwell with Wonderware, Orchestra, and then they use one of the probably the last few companies on earth that still use in-batch. And it's not a minor in-batch implementation either. They do some crazy backdoor scripting, like when you load a recipe, it compares the ingredients in the recipe to the ingredients that SAP says are in the plant to make sure that they match. And then the recipe loads, and then of course you've got all the data gathering in the recipe, and that pushes back up to SAP, and there's all these backdoor scripts that run on a control SQL server. I mean, it's like insane, right?
Right.
So how do you take a customer like that and move them? They've got the same installed base at all of their plants all over the world, right? So that's what I want to start talking to him about, is like, how do you take a customer like that, which is one of our kind of traditional big enterprise customers, like a a Colgate or a General Mills or a P&G or something like that that has all of this tight integration to business systems and enterprise systems, and then start kind of gently herding them towards, you know, industry 4.0 and kind of having that overall namespace where all of this stuff is together. Because,
Okay.
you know, it's great that you have all of this data in a plant and it kind of reports up through SAP, but then there's all of this historical data that's sitting in historians all over the states at all of these different facilities that, unless you're a systems engineer and something broke at 2 a.m, nobody ever looks at it.
Yeah.
But it's invaluable information if you could get it to a place where eventually AI, but in the short term, you know, some data analytics people or something like that could look at all of this information and compare, hey, this plant and this plant, they run the same products. Let's look at their throughput and look at line performance because the equipment's almost the same. But they don't do that.
Right.
So that I need to sit down with him and, you know, like, hey, what are your suggestions? Like, as a big picture, like to start moving customers like that towards that big picture.
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, from my experience, like what I would do, I would try to get something going in tandem with that system, right? So, you know, that like that MES in batch, all that logic, that's going to be real hard to just kind of rip out and replace at one fell swoop. But you can easily set in some sort of edge gateway that is shipping that real-time data up to your corporate enterprise level namespace. Do that across all your plants. So now you're collecting that data. You kind of got it all in one namespace. Down at the plant level, they're maybe still doing things with their old applications. But you're at least in the right start now that you're building out that namespace. From there, I would say taking, right, so you described a few scripts that do a few things. You know, hopefully it's documented what it does, but I think breaking that out.
And in the case at Colgate, it was one guy that knew how they worked.
Right.
If he would have gotten hit by a bus, we would have been hosed.
I mean, those are things that make sense that you would want to do, not just at that one plant, but at all the plants, right? So I would probably look at breaking those down into microservices. That's something that's kind of, you see a lot in like big tech companies starting to move more towards the microservice architecture. I mean, just think of those as little functions or buttons you could press, you know, in the cloud that gives you a specific result. So, you know, like checking to see, is this recipe able to be run at this plant? Well, you know, that does a few things. It looks at what the values inputs are for the recipe, looks at what the inputs are for, you know, available inventory, and then it returns you a yes or no, is it good to go? And then having that logic defined centrally, and it either run centrally in the cloud, or, you know, having that pushed down to your local levels to run locally. I think would be a good way to go about it. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. But yeah, at the end of the day, you know, it goes back to what his past few videos have been. It's trying to sell this idea, trying to sell the value of ultimately what this can provide. And if you've got all of this existing architecture and all of this installed base, it's a bit of a harder sell to say, hey, let's kind of start doing some of this stuff in tandem, because if you start looking at some of this stuff enterprise wide, there's like a ton of more knowledge that you can gain from it, you know, and value that you can get from this. But it's a hard sell when you've got all of this installed base, that, you know, that MES and enterprise level already at a company to compete with, I guess.
Yeah. You know, plus the internal resistance and, you know, people that support that MES system may not necessarily like that you're trying to replace it, you know, and et cetera. or whether that be integrators that support, the local plant, and then there's just some enterprise system going in, and now they think that they're, on the chopping block, which is probably not the case. I think, every plant is going to need its own local support, but there should be some cortex, some network that connects all of these little system integrators to kind of like one master hive mind of what the end goal is, so we can all work towards that individually, and we can all individually focus on our skills, whether that be like, hey, I live right down the street from this plant, so it makes sense for me to service it, to I'm an expert in pharmaceutical, so on the other side of the world I can work on that pharmaceutical project from here. It's interesting. What video from the content that Walker's been putting out strikes like the biggest chord with you? Which one do you remember the most? Your favorite?
Probably the Integrator 3.0 one. Either that one or probably the latest one on how to become a systems integrator. That one was really good too. Just because personally they struck such an emotional response within me. Just, you look back at your career and, going out as a contractor and starting my own business and all that kind of stuff. It just really hit home. And hearing how he started his company and the struggles and everything about it, it was just really neat to hear someone else that goes through the same struggles day in, day out, talk about it and discuss it and be very open and very honest about it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, nowadays with social media and everything, everybody tries to put out the pretty picture and, oh, look at us at the beach and it's a perfect life. So, to hear about the way it really is, it was really cool.
Awesome.
It was really neat.
Thanks for sharing that. I been asking a few people just so I can get my own feedback to, continue to improve on the work that we're doing together, the work that I'm doing on my own channel. And I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on Aviva?
Aviva. Is that the new partnership? Wait, what is Aviva?
Aviva is a newer name to our industry. Aviva was typically they were in the kind of servicing the design software and also like modeling software, engineering software, really heavy into the shipping and marine space. So they combined with Schneider Electric software and Wonderware. So they have the real time. I guess I haven't been doing a good job at getting that message out. But anyways, Wonderware had the real time operations and predictive analytics kind of portfolio, and Aviva Legacy had like the design and engineering software. So now they kind of are two halves to one whole. Now it has the whole asset life cycle, so you can design something in Aviva software, have that output to digital assets like your digital mock-up, have that go into actual being built into the operations, and then improvement and maintenance. So now at every step of the asset life cycle is what they call it, you can do that with Aviva portfolio software.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I guess for the stuff that we typically work on and that I'm familiar with, it was more of just a name change than anything. I'm not familiar with a lot of the other software, so I guess the majority of the stuff that we work with was traditionally Wonderware and kind of its product library. So for us, it's just been more of a name change. I mean, here in Houston, it's still Wonderware West that you call when you need something.
I think is Wonderware West, is it not ISS now or something? Industry Software Solutions? Industrial Software Solutions? I thought they changed their name.
No, like, I mean, it's still wonderwarewest.com.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of something else. Now I really want to check it out. But yeah, I never knew that world existed either until, going to the conference and seeing. It is definitely like for larger scale kind of operations where, like they're maybe designing an entire power plant.
Right.
So like they're starting from, the design and then going through operation. Like the InTouch is just like one part to that piece, right? And that's
Sure.
kind of like where we see, that's kind of where we see most of what we do. It's just like the one piece to their thing. So I think it is really unique. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially like larger refineries or maybe power plants or, maybe offshore oil and gas, things like that really can leverage each one of those software. So like if they do it right, I think it's kind of like the Rockwell thing, right? If you do it Rockwell right and you have all Rockwell from top to bottom, then their solution works well,
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think
they've got a tool for every single part of the design.
Yeah. So I think people that use Aviva, I mean, I guess you could still use Wonderware just as your typical SCADA and just leave it at that. And, that would work well, especially now with InTouch OMI. I'm seeing it be a lot more competitive with Ignition and with some of the newer platforms. They've really they had a period where I feel like they kind of slowed down their innovation, and now it's kind of speeding back up. So it's good to see that.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting with Ignition. I think when they first came to market, Wonderware and Rockwell, and everybody looked at them and it's like, it's a cool little gimmick. We'll see what happens. And then they really started working with some customers and getting a foothold in the industry, and it's just like exponential growth now. And I think like Rockwell, Wonderware, I think all of the classic platforms are kind of scared. And you can see it in pricing, right? So if you look at like Vue SE, you used to have to buy the server and then buy the clients individual and all that. Well, now miraculously, like in the past year, Rockwell's came out with a package, with I think it's a Vue SE package with unlimited screens and like 10 clients and Viewpoint, which is that's their web-based HMI tool. So it's been really cool to see just the push on the industry that Ignition has made, and I think it's moving everything in an awesomely good direction.
Yeah. It was Wonderware PacWest.
Gotcha.
Which is I think Northwest is now Industrial Software Solutions. There's another one, IS Cubed, Industrial Software Solutions. What? I gotta find this now. I talk to them all the time. Clarice. Industrial IS Cubed, Industry Software Solutions and Support. They're Wonderware South Africa, basically. So you're seeing a lot of the Wonderware distributors kind of change their name a little bit to reflect the Aviva merger.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, I've been kind of trying to document it. Like I've been to the Aviva World North America, Aviva World Dubai. I'm going to this Aviva. It's not an Aviva event. It's put on by Wonderware South Africa or IS Cubed. So I'm going to that next month, which will be really cool in Johannesburg, South Africa. And just to kind of see what is going on and just kind of give that more exposure, more insight. I am kind of noticing, everyone kind of had that similar sentiment where, it's like, Wonderware, Rockwell, maybe they just lagged behind a little bit. Ignition came out, showed like really what was capable. And Ignition did a lot of good things for the market, but I think in addition to just being a good platform, by forcing the other competitors to innovate is really where they have had the biggest impact, because I'm starting to see that, like even Wonderware Now they have InTouch. Used to be Machine Edition. It's now called InTouch Edge. And then they're also marketing unlimited clients, unlimited licensing, unlimited tag licensing now. So you're also kind of seeing like their sales models change and their naming, and maybe that's just the way the market is headed in general, or maybe Inductive was a catalyst in that. Either way, I think it's really good for the industry.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a really good push, just not only on pricing for the end customer, but just to push these companies that have really not had any competition over the past few years to really innovate and change. And, it is this whole industry 4.0 thing takes off, and, more and more data gathering happens out in the control panel at the plant floor, just to have those tools out there to really take advantage of it that aren't super expensive.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
Ignition, and that's the other thing. Ignition is kind of getting more expensive. So we're starting to see other platforms like FactoryStudio. It's kind of an Ignition similar platform built in .NET though, which is actually really inexpensive comparatively to Ignition. Starting to see that become more popular. I know every time Walker says Ignition in one of his videos, you can almost guarantee that he's also going to say like, whether you're using Ignition for your SCADA or FactoryStudio for your MES system. It's really funny because, he like I, we used to be big hard time Ignition advocates, gurus. Like I was at one point in time, I was like dogging Wonderware, like hating on them. But I've since kind of come full circle to where now I like enjoy all companies. All companies have good, all companies have bad, and talk about it more neutrally. So that is kind of cool. But it's funny because like I'll talk to Wonderware about Ignition, and like it's just funny that I feel like they just don't even own up to, like, they just try to pretend like Inductive who? Like they just try to pretend like that, like they weren't even phased by Inductive. And, in some sense, maybe that is true to an extent. I mean, Aviva's 4,000 employee company and Inductive's like just over 100. So It's not to say Aviva's better because it has more people. It's a bigger ship, it has more software products. Like, it's not just a platform that people can develop on. It's actually like turnkey OEE software, turnkey design software. Sure. InTouch OMI is kind of a platform that you can develop in, but it has apps. Like it has a marketplace. Like it's an ecosystem. So it's not just going to die overnight. But it is funny that like when questioned about like, and then I go to talk to Inductive and like I asked and wonder, I wish they would just like be more accepting of each other. I really would like to see that, because us as integrators, we can talk about it and and it's all cool. But like I'll ask Wonderware like, oh, did you guys choose to do market free licensing to compete with Inductive, or did you switch InTouch Edge to that because of Ignition Edge? And they're like, no, that's just our choice, right? But then you go talk to Ignition and they're like, oh, of course it's a marketing thing. Like they're just trying to compete against us. They're scared. Like, I don't know. While it may be true, I want to see more openness, more transparency, more collaboration. I mean, it'd be cool to see Aviva implement MQTT with Sparkplug B support, right? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think at the end of the day, the supplier companies, Wonderware, Rockwell, Inductive Automation, whoever, they have to realize that as the industry moves forward, right, as an integrator, I should not be pushing, even though, and it's kind of what Walker was saying, right, about being manufacturer agnostic. If they've got agreements with one manufacturer, then anyway, as we move forward, the bigger part of our job is going to be choosing the right tool for the project. And for one project that may be Ignition, for one project that may be Wonderware, for one project that may be Rockwell. But either way, moving forward, the companies have to realize that the way they're going to get picked is to continue to innovate and to provide the value at a good price point for whatever project it is. And you may have an Ignition that's really good for, smaller systems or huge distributed systems with, thousands of tags. Because of the way the architecture is, it better leverages kind of that shared ecosystem across multiple servers. Or, if you've got a small plant with so many tags and Rockwell PLCs, and it's Vue SE, but they've got to keep innovating and knowing that at the end of the day, the way they're going to get a sale is by providing value to the end customer. I think we're finally getting to a point where there's enough people out there and there are enough open source tools that if the value is not there, then they're going to start losing sales. And it's not all about, oh, I'm buying a Rockwell product, or, oh, I'm buying Wonderware. And it may not even be because it's cheaper anymore. It may, it'll be because it's the best tool for that project or for that application.
Right. I see two ways, two schools of thought. I definitely don't think Rockwell will ever support MQTT open with Sparkplug B. There are ways around it. Like I think they have a little device that can do MQTT, but it's like all of their ThingsWorks and things like that. It's all proprietary protocol, which I don't have a problem with. I think that Rockwell knows its model and it works its model, like the closed ecosystem, the walled garden, kind of like the Apple approach. Everything within its own family works really nice together. And once you're in, you're kind of locked into that ecosystem. So I think that's one way. Ignition's kind of on the other end of that spectrum, completely open source. Aviva, I find it very interesting because, Wonderware kind of built itself on being platform agnostic. They talk about that all the time. You're not just going to be able to connect to Schneider PLCs. You can connect to Allen Bradley or Siemens or whatever device, right? So they've had that in their DNA. So I think it will be exciting to see if they do implement MQTT with Sparkplug B. I think that would actually be the smartest thing for them to do, because I'm kind of tired of people thinking that Sparkplug B just means Ignition, right?
Right.
It's just an open protocol. Ignition happened to be one of the first people to implement it, with Cirrus Link, but you're starting to see other companies like FactoryStudio implement it. Flow Software, Canary Labs, I think, is doing MQTT now. I think if Wonderware implemented an MQTT with Sparkplug B driver, boom, now they've just leveled the ecosystem. They've just leveled the playing field. Now, MQTT is no longer a selling point for Ignition only now, because Wonderware can match that, right?
Sure, and then you can just upgrade whatever existing system you have there and start moving into the future. And it's very simple. And then you can take, kind of that scaled approach that we were talking about earlier of, defining projects and baby stepping your way
right.
to a 4.0 solution, rather than having to strategically pick individual parts and pieces to cut and hack out and replace.
Yeah. So it would be really exciting to see Aviva adopt that. Like I said, I don't think Rockwell will, and I think it would be smart for them to not to, because that's against their own model. What I would like to see is them to be more open about that. But I guess I don't know if the part of what makes it work is that it is a secretive thing. Like, I don't know. I'd like to see Rockwell more open about owning their philosophy on how automation should be, rather than just being like, oh, like trying to say, oh, well, we just don't believe in it. Like, just be honest. Like, oh, well, we don't want to be an open. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I guess I look at Apple and they don't explicitly go out and say, hey, we're not going to support this. They just, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's bizarre though, right? Because with them purchasing Kepware, or what, PTC, is that their parent company?
Right. Yeah. So PTC purchased Kepware, and then
So
Rockwell made a $1 billion investment in PTC and a partnership.
right. So now that Rockwell owns that company, which has traditionally been based on we can talk to anything for any purpose, um, it'll be interesting to see how they leverage that moving forward.
Mm.
Just you've got all the tools.
Could you
And
imagine if they made Kepware like not able to talk to other software or something like we start losing some of that functionality?
Well, I know, and that's why it's interesting to me. That whole purchase was about trying to open up the ecosystem and uh, make their products more applicable to everything else that's out there.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. I like that perspective. I mean, it's not like a black and white rule. Like there are obviously Allen Bradley PLCs across the world that talk to other SCADA systems just fine, right? It's
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure even FactoryTalk SE could work on PLCs that are not Allen Bradley, although I think that scenario is less common. So
No,
you
it's
can there.
possible. It just requires Kepware.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So it's not like that it has to be that way, but I think from Rockwell's perspective is that it should be that way, and that's the best way, and they should openly advocate that that's their approach. Or like you said, if they're trying to change and be more open, then they should also talk about
Right.
that. But what I don't like is just saying, oh, we're not supporting MQTT because we don't believe that it's a good protocol. I mean, come on, that's it. Like, do you really think that, or are you just saying that
Right.
because you know that it's open and you don't want it to be open because that's your philosophy, right?
Right. Or if you don't think it's a good protocol, then take the even bigger step and get on the working committee and all of that kind of stuff to better define the standard to something that you're willing to support.
Right. I've asked this question: if Rockwell were one of the tech companies, who would you compare them to?
Oh, I don't know. I think Apple's a good comparison, but like not to be mean, like typically Apple just works though, right? Most of the time Rockwell works.
Okay. Okay.
But every once in a while, you get into one of those situations where you didn't look at the compatibility matrix just right, and you figure out that one drive out in the field doesn't have the right firmware installed to talk to the whole system that you just upgraded.
Oh no,
So
that's very much Apple-like though, like kind of a planned obsolescence, or now the first iPads and iPhones are not able to even work anymore because they're only upgradable to iOS 5, and I think that's pretty consistent with Apple. I've also thought Amazon was an interesting comparison because of the nature how Rockwell wants to be at every part of your plant, right? They want to be your PLC, they want to be your terminal block, your push button, your HMI, your servers, your infrastructure, your even some of your like business logic, like the analytics portion of it. Like they want to basically be an extension of your company.
for sure.
Even the integration, like they're starting to deliver the services now, and they've just acquired another engineering firm that's primarily focused in oil, and so now they're like the first turnkey top to bottom automation supplier for Rockwell products in oil and gas now. So
Absolutely.
I think that's yeah.
It started with them buying Maverick a couple of years ago, right?
Oh yeah.
And that gave them a really big push into food and beverage services, breweries in particular. And then now with this latest partnership with Schlumberger, it'll be really interesting to see how they leverage that relationship into kind of the companies that Schlumberger typically supports and contracts with.
Yeah.
I'll be very curious to see how they leverage that relationship and that partnership to move harder into that field. Because I think Rockwell, they do a decent job. I mean, here, in Texas, you see a lot of upstream oil and gas, especially using Rockwell. I mean, you'll still see some SCADA packs and Siemens here and there and some other vendors, but Rockwell, especially like the Micrologix 1800 and some of their other smaller platforms, compact logics, you see a lot of those out in the oil field. So I'll be curious to see how this relationship, helps them to ensure their growth in that market and kind of push further into it.
Yeah. But yeah, from the perspective that, I don't, coming from the system integration side, I never really liked that. Like, why would I be an integrator for Rockwell if Rockwell's also going to compete against me? So that I never liked. So from that perspective, I was like, all right, well, if it's going to be a Rockwell solution, it should be a Rockwell solution top to bottom, including delivery and maintenance and everything. So, because that's really their model. Whereas I think, Inductive does have a little bit of design services. They do some project work, but I think they generally do try to, steer that work towards their integrators and kind of respect that. But yeah, it's interesting.
No, yeah, that's always been one of the evils, is the competition.
And the distributors too are also been another area where it's also kind of been a gray line as far as what's the role of the distributor? Are they also your competitor? Do they work for you? Do they work for the manufacturer?
I'll have to say here in Houston, even in Nashville, both distributors that we work with. So in Nashville, it's Irby, and here it's the Reynolds Company. They've actually been really, really helpful. I would say with those two in particular, it has not been a competition.
Okay, that's good.
Both of those that I've had the pleasure of working with have been actually really good to work with and would bend over backwards to help you out, especially when you get in a pinch and need stuff at the last minute or need to expedite things. They're really great to work with. But neither of those two do service.
That's good.
Typically. Whereas I think in other parts of the country, some of the distributors actually offer services. Luckily, ours don't.
Yeah. And I'm not even opposed to them doing that. With me being out of system integration, like I have, I guess, less skin in the game on that argument, so I can look at it less biased. But I think I do see a value in kind of having less, I guess, middlemen. So in a way, the system integrator, like we've talked about many times, it is changing. Like the role between the software manufacturer, the distributor, the integrator, and the end user is that relationship is changing. It's fluid.
Yeah, and that's where I think you'll see, especially on the distributor side, and if you want to call them industry 3.0 integrators or whatever, I think you'll eventually have a group of people that does really well with hardware, and they know PLC hardware really, really well. And then, as this gets more specialized and gets more technical, that may be where some system integrators kind of split off and only focus on the process side and the software side, so that they can focus on providing the best software solutions for any given platform, rather than trying to offer that whole suite of services front to back, through hardware design, panel build, all of that, and instead focus just on the software platforms and kind of the actual process design of the project rather than the hardware.
How do you see us working best together on LinkedIn, like with some of the other LinkedIn automation industry professionals? How do you see us working together? Like, it was interesting the other day, someone like reached out like, hey, I need a system integrator, on LinkedIn. How can we refer us to each other? Like, like, all right, we draw straws, or like who's busiest, or is it geographically based, or, if we know, like, all right, if it's a dihedral SCADA system, then we know Eric has that expertise, or, if it's FactoryStudio, that's Walker or whatever, right? Like, how do you see us kind of being a without necessarily working together or without being a company, how can we be a network most effectively?
No, I think it comes down to getting, having conversations like this, whether in person or virtual or whatever, but really understanding kind of where everybody's strengths and weaknesses are. Because, like we talked, so Siemens is not my strength. Brian Weed, I've seen him comment on a bunch of people's posts, usually hating on Rockwell because he's a Siemens guy. Never met him, but I know that he knows Siemens very well. So, if somebody was looking to do a Siemens project, I think he's in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, maybe he would be a good one to recommend. Never sat down and talked to him. So, I have no idea like what projects he's done in the past or anything like that.
He's also your guy if you need a hypnotist too.
Really?
Yeah. Brian's really funny. He's kind of a bit of a troll, but it's just his personality. He's kind of a different thinker and very much against the norm and but yeah, actually I had him on my podcast and maybe I'll get him on again this year if I can get a hold of him. He usually gets his LinkedIn profiles blocked somehow and then he creates fake ones and his title will be like automation wizard or like hypnotist. So he's a funny guy, but yeah, that's funny.
But no, and I think that's what it comes down to is no different than in real life, right? So like with real projects, when we get hit, if it's something that I don't have enough guys to go do, I've got the short list of people that I've worked with, some of them for 10, 15 years on projects. And, you give those guys a call. But in LinkedIn, I think it'll even be neater because it's kind of like Walker said, in his whole thing about the zero sum game, right? If you can send a potential customer, maybe they're not in your area, maybe they're in some other area of the country, that it wouldn't make sense for you to help them. If you can refer them to someone that's going to provide them ultimately a good product, then we all win. Yeah. Because maybe they do have another plant that is in your region that they're like, hey man, they hooked us up with a great integrator here and made sure we were taken care of. So hey, when we're doing a project at our other plant in their region, we're calling those guys. So I don't know. I think that's what it comes down to is making the connections and figuring out what everybody does really, really well, so that when those questions come up, you can refer people and pass the torch and
awesome
do the right thing.
The algorithm is really strange. It's like a digital representation of those friendships and connections and that's kind of, even if we don't comment on something, if I just simply like your post, that's helping you out. And when you comment on my post, it helps get my message out, and we're kind of building this network and making it stronger. And so I have a question. I'm going to be developing a video course on how to leverage LinkedIn video, taking into account everything I've learned in the last year. What would you find, what would you look for in a course like that that's kind of aimed towards business owners or engineers who are looking to level up their career using LinkedIn primarily with video? What would you want to see in that type of course?
So between Chris Lukey with Rockwell, the one video or podcast, it was like a minute or 2 minutes long, where he went kind of through his typical travel rig of what he takes with him to do podcasts and stuff. Maybe expanding on that, just hey, here are the basics to making good videos with an iPhone. Here's kind of, do you need a tripod? Is it best to have a light? Do you need a light? Microphones, just kind of the basics of capturing footage, right? Because some people start out with a webcam, some people start out with their phone and it's shaky and you can hear all kinds of wind blowing in the background and so all that stuff, right? And then just the best tools and the best methods maybe to like quickly edit stuff, because that's
Okay.
where I get hung up a lot, is trying to, you know, uh, I've got uh, Adobe on my laptop, and then I've got what's their new one, Rush,
Yeah, a rush.
on my phone. But the problem is my laptop's still Windows 7, so I can't load Rush on my PC. So there I use Premiere Pro, and it anyway. But just kind of go through some of the stuff and the best tools, like, because for business owners and professionals, um, it's time, right? That's the worry, is how much time is it going to take me to, because like sitting there and recording 3 or 4 minutes worth of video, if you can just post it, no worries. But when you want to talk about, say, HMI design, and you want to throw some slides into it and make yourself, like go down into a corner so they can still see you talking, but you can actually see the slide, it takes some time to do the editing. But I don't know, tips and tricks, like to go through, like to quickly edit videos and make something look reasonably polished.
Okay.
And then, yeah, just as you have been on LinkedIn, any hints that you have, like to hack the algorithm, are invaluable.
Right. Okay.
And it's not so much like hacking, but just, and that's something I've kind of started paying attention to when I do posts, just pictures and text and even video, who comments on it and who likes it. And then you can kind of correlate that to their following and ultimately how many views you get on a video. And it's like you said, Derek's got what, 17,000 followers or connections or something like that. If he likes one of my posts, holy crap, the whole world sees it,
Yeah.
which is unreal. But yeah, it's neat the way all of that works and how exponential the growth can be, just depending on who comments and or likes it.
Yeah. I think you're
Like what you were saying is, I've in amongst all the madness, you try to spend at least 5 or 10 minutes a day kind of going through the feed and liking and commenting on things that make sense and all that kind of stuff. And I will say that has definitely made a difference, just in, I think, how much of my stuff gets seen. But anything like that you have just as suggestions is really cool and worthwhile.
cool, man.
And then the other thing, to kind of get off LinkedIn, I know you specify on, or like special, have you looked at Instagram at all?
Yeah, so I do use Instagram, and
Okay.
I haven't like dived super deep into it or spent a whole lot of time building my brand on it. It's kind of like a little bit of a storyboard. It's kind of where people can see a more personal side of me. Like if I
Okay.
share things about my family, maybe things that are not related to automation, definitely all the traveling. But yeah, it's just kind of I just view it as like a long-term archive, kind of like my own photo book a little bit. I haven't really been super focused on that because I have really chosen LinkedIn to focus on.
Sure.
That's definitely a good one. And another one that I would like to see more industrial companies use.
Right.
Chris has started to get on that platform, and
Yeah. Well, that's what I've noticed. Like, I've still got a screenshot of it, because I've got one for Arrington Automation. And, when we go to trade shows, conferences, stuff like that, I'll post pictures or cool videos. And that was like the highlight of my week. I think it was at Hack Expo, or maybe an Automation Fair last year. Rockwell Automation started following me, and it was like, oh. But just for some businesses and kind of industry, I think it makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of like-minded people on there. I just don't know for industrial automation and like engineering in general. It's very nebulous, I think, on how to reach the right people on that platform. Versus
right.
LinkedIn, it's very professional. There's a lot of like-minded people. It's very much a fit. So yeah.
I think for that end, it's not for Instagram and Facebook. where that becomes interesting is using their ad products to target people based on location, or target people based on having visited your website. You know, there's a pixel that you can install on your website that sends information about users to Facebook. Then you can run ads against those users.
Really?
Right. That's how you'll see.
Okay.
You know, someone goes to your website, and then, you know, I mean, pretty much everyone's on Facebook and a lot of people are on Instagram. So it's not that your audience isn't there. They're not necessarily thinking about who am I going to select for my control system integrator while they're on Facebook, but they might see your ad. You know, I see a lot of inductive ads on Facebook talking about their new webinar, talking about ICC, you know, now on Instagram. So I think leveraging their ad products will be really useful. But yeah, I've just been really excited. I've really been fortunate to kind of have a good timing to jump on LinkedIn at the time when video was exploding. And yeah, so now I'm just kind of, I would have never thought I would have wanted to release a course. I maybe had a bit of a jaded view, like, oh, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's like selling someone how to make money just by selling them a course. And that's really the way you're making the money, is just by selling them the course. It's kind of the way I used to think of it, but I'm thinking of it differently now, in that I have a year's worth of experience learning this stuff. And if I could package it down to like an hour's worth of, you know, 5 or 6 videos, be able to convey that to someone, teach something of them, a skill that took me a long time to acquire, they could acquire it in a short time, and maybe build their brand on LinkedIn with no more than an hour a week or something like that, right? Or, you know, build your brand on LinkedIn in 15 minutes a day using these 5 steps. Sure. Or something like that, and then really unlock a lot of value for them. So whatever I charge for the course, $10, $20, it'll be well worth it for them to purchase that.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things. It's like, it's weird saying it, and I feel like I'm plugging it now. It's probably already out by now by the time this gets released. So if it is, I'll link it. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, all right, well, now this is what I'm doing now. So this is yeah, it is a way to make money, but really it's a way of transferring value and taking a small margin of that value back, right?
Well, sure, because it's been interesting just to see how many people have gotten in contact with me about potential projects and stuff like that just because of posts. You know, it's like, oh, hey, I saw you post this panel that you did, or hey, saw this picture of this cool project you were doing. You guys do this stuff normally. It's just neat, you know, especially as a business owner, to see how you can leverage something that's free, you know, to grow your business. Yeah. In the beginning, you know, it's like, it'd be a cool way to meet people and just see some cool stuff. But now it's really becoming a way to find a lot of like-minded people and even get leads off of it. It's been kind of cool.
Dope, man. Dude, well, I mean, shoot, we're coming up on 2 hours here. This is this is an amazing session.
No, I didn't mean to blow your evening.
No, it's good. It's still earlier here in the West Coast. But I'm glad that we were able to kind of dive deeper into some of these topics, because I feel like, you know, for anyone who's still listening, they obviously really enjoyed it. I enjoyed myself. So how could people reach you? And do you have a closing statement, like kind of to summarize our conversation, or a question for the audience?
Not really well, I guess when it comes down to LinkedIn and stuff, you know, especially, most of us are very, very introverted as engineers. And it's been just kind of neat to step out of the comfort zone here recently and, you know, start getting engaged, getting involved. And especially even just professionally, to push myself in person, just to go up and talk to people and meet people and trying to do more of that sales stuff. So that's, I don't know, if you're that engineer or you're that guy or girl looking to go out and start your own business and do your own thing, I don't know, just go out and talk to people, meet people, make connections. What's the worst they can tell you? No? I mean, you know, the benefits and the possible rewards far outweigh anything negative that could happen. And yeah, me being one of those big introverted people, that's a big lesson I've learned over the past 6 months to a year, and it has been invaluable.
Yeah, that's excellent, man. That's kind of I think of this course I'm working on launching, which is outside my comfort zone and not something I've never done before. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? I make it and no one buys it.
Right.
Or maybe no one does buy it, but maybe someone gets confidence from me going outside of my comfort zone, and then they decide to launch their own course, like on PLC or IIoT or what have you. That would be worth it alone. So even if I don't make any sales, I'm still learning. I'm and kind of putting that positivity back out into the world.
Yep. Absolutely.
Eric,
and then
man.
for contact info, Eric at arringtonautomation.com, and then you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Eric, man, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good evening.
Peace out. We'll talk soon.
See ya.